As you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you're on and its history. We're located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee.
The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon, One Pen Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful to work on this land.
Good morning and welcome to this TIFF press conference for Lakewood. My name is Janelle Riley. I'm an editor at Variety, and I am thrilled to welcome today's guests. Please join me in welcoming producers Zach Schiller, Dylan Sellers, Andrew Corkin. We also have producer and screenwriter Chris Sparling, director Phillip Noyce.
Hi.
Hi. And producer and star Naomi Watts.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations on a very tense film. It took me a couple hours to fall asleep after this one. Don't watch it just before bedtime. I would love to start at the beginning with Chris. What was the initial impetus for the story, sort of the idea that first sparked the script for you?
Well, the idea for the movie, Andrew and I, like we tend to occasionally just say, you get itchy and you want to go make a movie. And so I first conceived of the idea of doing another movie in the fashion that I did with Buried years ago when I wrote that. But like that movie, it came down to the why. It's one thing to say you can do something, but I think there's a reason it's important to know why. And so I wanted to tell the story of a community affected by this kind of tragedy. And I was writing this at a time where, my daughter is a school-age child. She's getting on the bus every day to go to school. And I just think fundamentally it's a pretty flawed, for lack of a better word, messed up thing that we as parents have to consider in this country.
Absolutely. So I guess I would love to ask the producers. We'll start with Dylan. What attracted you to the project? How did you come to be involved? And specifically a concept where so much of the runtime is focused on one person?
I guess two things, really. One, the idea. What Chris just said, I just thought it was a great idea. I thought it was a great angle into, this world, these issues, but done in I don't want to spoil anything, but done in a very unique way. Obviously, I've never seen anything like this. And Naomi, the combination. I mean, I would have liked to have had the foresight to say I would have done it without Naomi, but the combination of this, concept with Naomi, it just seemed a tour de force for an actress. And it, as a parent of 4 daughters, I, related to a lot of what Chris was writing about. So it just seemed like a movie about something and a really good commercial thriller sort of together. So that was it.
Zach and Andrew, for you?
Sure. Yeah. So, Chris and I, when we were originally coming up with this idea for the story that is a story about heroism, but in a very different way, we knew that it was going to be a challenging story to get told. And so we're just so grateful that, we first went to Naomi and Naomi believed in this story as well. And then putting this team together, Zach, Dylan, Phillip, is that they saw the film in the same way. Unfortunately in Hollywood, there probably would have been financiers and studios that would have said, turn her into John McClane and she should kick down the door. And, that's what heroism is, but that's not what this film is. And so Chris wrote this incredibly beautiful, nuanced story of a mother's love and the lengths that it will go to. And so we knew that we had something special before we ever sent it around, that we were really excited to be able to, first of all, make a story that we knew that Chris and I could go out and make ourselves if no one else was going to support us. But we're on this call. We have the benefit of playing at one of the best film festivals of the world because luckily people see the power of this story. And so it just was a no-brainer from the get-go when Chris said, I have this idea.
Phillip, go ahead.
I thought it kind of was a John McClane character when I read it. So what excited me was Naomi reprising John McClane.
Phillip, you have directed some of the most action-packed and tense movies in cinema. What interested you in this film and keeping the momentum and tension high, even when it's, say a cell phone conversation?
Well, first of all, it was the middle of the first COVID lockdown when Dylan rang me and got me to read the script. And the idea of escaping lockdown to Northern Ontario and making a movie with an actress that I'd admired for a long, long time was just too hard to resist. I mean, it was the perfect antidote to that COVID mortal feeling that I was feeling, and I knew was affecting, so many filmmakers. Inactivity and no end in sight to that inactivity. But really, it was that it touched me. It touched me in ways that I wouldn't have been touched 10 years ago, because now my son is just a teenager, like Naomi's kids. And, it just touched on fears that I felt increasingly as he approached teenagerhood, not just because of the issue of gun control, but also because my 13-year-old is now becoming his own self. And I wonder who that person is. And that's how I connected with Naomi, because she was wondering the same things.
I mean, obviously this film, it just doesn't work without the right actor as Amy Carr. Naomi, what interested you in the project?
Well, I think every time I take on a film, that the story has to be meaningful to me, most importantly. If it's not meaningful to me, it's not going to connect with an audience. There's so many things that goes into making a film good, and we all know that. There's so much alignment needed, not just a great story, not just a great point of view or vision from a filmmaker, not just good performances, not just great shots that are interesting, compelling, and music that drives the story. Even if all of those things align beautifully, there's still the audience. How do they feel about it? Is there something else coming out at the same time that's similar? There's so many things. So in the end, I just have to choose a role that speaks to me. And what can I bring to it? What scares me about it? What does it mean to my life? And I just kept coming back to how haunting this would be, seeing myself in this woman's shoes and adopting her mindset of how to struggle in complete chaos, from a state of powerlessness to panic to actually coming into her power and then moving it. I mean, there's so much undulation throughout her trajectory that both terrified me and interested me. Nobody wants to see themselves in this position, but we've all dreaded it at one point or another.
You also came aboard as a producer. I'm curious if this came to you as a package deal, or if there was a certain point where it just made sense to be a producer as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd worked with Chris before, and he approached me, he and Andrew, and I had a great time getting to know him on Sea of Trees. And then when I read the script, we spoke about it. I was like, wow, this is going to be really hard. I don't know how this will work. But again, I wasn't thinking of the end result. I was thinking of the fact that there was a certain necessity to tell a story like this. It felt powerful. And I'd seen that Chris had done a great job with Buried. I'd seen other films like Lock, Guilty. So I'd seen it work. But at the end of the day, I had to do it for myself. It's almost like I want to understand what, as gruesome as it is, what that world feels like.
When you realized that so much of the film would be, just you on the camera, was that an exciting prospect, an intimidating prospect, maybe both?
All of the above. Yes, completely. And it was every day that continued. It wasn't just, in the preamble, it was every day. Because you were just being thrown obstacles all the time. And we went for these really long shots, and, sometimes somebody's falling over and you've got to keep going and somehow not break the great shot. I'm a big believer in never calling cut myself. That's for the director to choose. And so we just kept going, and Phillip has so much energy. He just kept me going. He was a good taskmaster. He kept us on moving. Some of those shots, I think we ran 2 or 3 miles at a time. So it was, but that was the beauty of it. It was driving the emotion, because the utter exhaustion was just a constant thing to grapple with. And yeah, sometimes I would lose a line, or sometimes, so I'd have to make it up, or sometimes we'd lose signal with the other actors on the end of the line. Got to keep going. Sometimes the light would blow out, but we just kept going, and beautiful accidents occur.
Christopher Sparling, I would love to know, because you had worked with Naomi before, was there any time that you started to write this with her in mind, or is that dangerous? I know a lot of writers don't like to write with certain actors in mind.
Yeah, generally I don't do that. For me, it was just, it was just like, this would be amazing if she would do this, because I mean, she was our first choice, and I did have the luxury, like Naomi said, of we worked together in the past and we had a great experience there. But but people are busy, and people are in demand, and you just hope for the best that it'll work out. And so, yeah, I mean, we met Naomi. It seems like forever ago, considering there was a pandemic in between. But I remember we sat down in New York and we talked about it, and yeah, and then no pun intended, we were off and running.
Phillip, you mentioned that you'd admired Naomi for some time. It's actually strange to me that this is your first collaboration. It feels like such a natural pairing. I don't know if that's because you're both Australian, and I assume that everyone knows each other on that continent.
Everyone does know each other, but somehow our paths never crossed. We never made a film together. So that was one off my wish list, to be able to work with Naomi and to work so intensively. Wow.
Yeah.
She talks about those 2-mile takes, or running 11 minutes. She one day put the cameraman, the DOP, 3 camera operators, and 4 grips into the medical tent. No one. We had to stop filming eventually because we didn't have anybody who could hold the camera. And Naomi was just there, ready to go. Amazing agility, amazing. I mean, I guess as she says, she fed off that. The exhaustion, put her into Amy's position, at that point in the film.
I mean, Naomi, for you, the role requires so much of you physically and emotionally. I'm exhausted just watching you. How did you sort of prepare? I'm literally and figuratively to run a marathon.
Yeah. Well, I have been somebody who's always loved exercise and sports, luckily. I used to run all the time, and then I stopped because I get back injuries. I have an injury that sort of recurs if I'm not careful. And suddenly this movie was ready to go, and I started running again and doing sprints, doing long runs. And it's amazing what your body can do. The memory of the muscle is definitely good. And I, just got there and just kept going. We had a PT lady on set who worked miracles, who was there like rubbing my legs in between, because, you know, undoubtedly you'd get like a pulled muscle or, you know, just hurting a lot. I managed to unwind at the end of each day with a hot bath and just got through.
I must say that on one day, that back injury came back and Naomi was in obvious pain, incredible pain, but she didn't ask us to stop. She just kept going.
We have a question from Music Movie Thoughts. We don't always get a film from a parent's perspective regarding a school shooting or violence. Why was it important to relate this story primarily from Amy's vantage point?
Zach?
Sorry, there was a fire truck going by. Can you just repeat the question?
Oh, of course. It was a question from Music Movie Thoughts. We don't always get a film from a parent's perspective regarding a school shooting or violence. Why was it important to relate this story primarily from Amy's vantage point?
Well, I think that the human part of this story is what's important to everybody on this call, not the spectacle of violence. And this is it's a story about it's really a story that asks you to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's been through what is the worst experience that a parent can have. And that's what drew me to the project. And I think everybody here spent a long time making sure that we did the hard thing, which is to tell a story from one perspective and not to cut away and do the traditional things that you have to do to keep the tension going. I think Phil, from a technical perspective, really did a tremendous job keeping the film moving, keeping the interest, and really driving the storytelling with one person on screen. And Naomi is, when you see the movie, you'll get it. But she's the only person that I think could have really pulled this off, and she did a masterful job.
Actually, I would love to know in the screenwriting, Christopher, what were, obviously there's challenges in writing a script where so much action and information is being relayed while it's actually taking place off screen. Was this a challenging script to write? Did you see that as, sort of barriers, or did you sort of embrace the challenge?
No, I mean, I embrace the challenge. You're, in a weird way, writing a script like this is, air quotes, easier, because you are just sticking to this one specific lens the whole movie. And you're playing in almost real time. So it's a very, as a writer doing this, I'm basically Naomi in that moment. Like I am feeling this. So it comes out it feels less like you're writing a movie and more like you're writing like a nonstop play. It's just, get this out of what's happening next. Oh my God, this is what I'm feeling as I'm writing it. So here it is. And now what would be the next thing I felt or next thing I would try to do as a parent? So it becomes I try to capture that, because you do find yourself, especially when stress kicks in, you don't always make the right decisions. You don't always know what to do. You're just a person, right? And you're trying your best. And so like in putting myself in those shoes, in a way it comes out faster because it's just getting out of you. It's almost like being pulled out of you. And I mean, at the time, I'm sure I was writing it at various coffee shops, and I can only imagine what I look like as I'm sitting there writing it, going, like a madman. But I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. It's some ways easier, in some ways it is harder too. Yeah.
Did you write the script pre-pandemic?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes,
I mean, because it sort of, I don't want to say it works perfectly, but, kind of a bonus that you were able to shoot it during lockdown, really.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I mentioned that when we first met, Naomi and I, and then the lockdown happened. And I remember both of us a couple times, Naomi, were like just so eager to do something creative. you know, like because this is when we were truly on lockdown, all of us, and just the idea as just wanting to get out and do something. And so, I mean, that's the credit to everyone else on this call to say that they were, you know, able to make that happen.
I mean, getting any movie made feels like a miracle these days. I'd love to hear from the producers some of the logistics. Like, did you know that did you hope to shoot in chronological order? You know, did you find that obviously there's going to be challenges with COVID restrictions, but did you ever, you know, necessity is the mother of all invention. Were there things you learned during this that, you know, maybe you'll take forward in producing?
I'll let Andrew speak about the about doing it in order, but you know, we were going to do this in New York, and then the pandemic happened, and then we sat around for about a month, and Dylan and I have financed it together. We got to keep the lights on, and we got people employed, and we got to figure out how to move stuff forward. And this was it was one person on a screen. At that time, we were like, we could shoot her from 20 feet away. No one has to get near her. You know, like, how do we do this? Keep Naomi safe, and keep a crew, you know, safe. And we found this place in Canada called North Bay. We have one active COVID case, a town of 50,000 people. The entire time we were there, we were in and out as, you know, efficiently as possible. And you know, we all got to exercise our creative juices, and nobody got sick. You know, the first few days were a little tense because people hadn't been around anybody before. You know, the crew had to learn two people had to share a van. You know, that hadn't happened in 6 months before we started shooting. So there were little bumps in the road, but I think we all felt very fortunate to be able to go and do what we love to do after being locked in a house with our children for 6 months.
And Andrew, you can speak to the shooting in chronological order.
Yeah, so it's funny now, just replaying it in my head. We actually started. We knew going into shooting in North Bay that weather might be a challenge, and so we were assuming, okay, it's going to probably rain half the days. We actually had one day of rain, and that was our first day. And so we shot the scenes of Amy in the lift as the first day. So it also was nice, Naomi didn't have to start, you know, running right away as we started the shoot. But then after that, you know, it was nice that we found these incredible locations. It's just a testament to how wonderful North Bay was as sort of our backdrop, is that we were able to find these incredible places, these waterfalls and these lakes and these incredible trails in the woods, so that, you know, we could do it as linear as possible. It's not, you know, perfectly linear ultimately, but, you know, we were for the most part able to tell Amy's story in some chronological order.
And the fact that it looks consistent is a testament to Phil's technical skill, and John Brawley, who's our DP. You know, we shot over the course of several weeks, but, you know, this all has to look like the same hour and a half, 2 hours of Amy's life. And you know, the leaves are changing, the light's changing, it's going into fall, but I think it, you know, with some good Ontario set dressing there, the film's quite spectacular.
And I believe Philip mentioned before this conversation that it was a year ago today that you were shooting. I'm curious, I don't think many movies were back shooting at that point. Dylan, can you talk about, you know, working during COVID times and sort of having to write a playbook as you go? I don't know if there were people you could talk to that, you know, had experience with this.
Not really. I mean, I think we were one of the handful of first movies to do this during COVID. I mean, everybody was sort of standing down. Zach really was the one who figured out, you know, all the Canada stuff and the legal and financial, and, you know, so I'll let him speak more to the business of how we were able to do it. But at the end of the day, I mean, Zach kind of said it. There wasn't like a huge playbook. It was like we got one person, and Phil and I had worked together before, and, you know, he's basically one stop for everything. You know, he really is. He does pretty much every aspect of the production. So honestly, I figured between a writer, Phil, and an actress, we didn't have much, you know. And out in the middle of the wilderness, I thought, you know, if there's any movie you can make during COVID, this is it. And most of the headache, honestly, was Zach's business, which was honestly, all the legal and business complications, because at that time, there was no insurance. So, all that stuff had to be really figured out. There was no COVID insurance. So, not to pat ourselves in the back, but it was a big risk, self-insuring and all that stuff. So that was the biggest headache. I don't think the production was as much, from my point of view anyway. It's just trying to figure out, could we do this safely? Could we do it? And Canada was just kind of finding their way with the regulations. Nobody was shooting in America, I don't think, Zach, right? I mean, there was nothing shooting in the States at all. I mean, we really wanted to shoot it in Naomi's backyard. That was the plan. And you really couldn't shoot in America at that point.
I think the COVID restrictions really hit us, or hit me, during post-production.
Oh.
Because this was a film that was post-produced through my iMac. I have never met most of the people who worked on the post-production. I haven't met my editor to this day. The sound mixers, I haven't met. The color graders. The only person I'd met, in fact, and the one whose skill contributed so much to knitting the film together, is Phil Eisler, the composer.
Mm.
I mean, that's an incredible score. He's never ahead of Naomi's character, and yet he's always embellishing the drama. And he never repeats himself. He keeps reinventing, the score. So he reinvents the experience for the audience. And he keeps us on the edge of our seats.
Absolutely.
So he's the only one in post-production that I actually met in person.
No, that's not true.
Which is, what we do nowadays during.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
I came to your house once.
Oh, you came to my house right at the end when we were looking at the sound mix. Yeah, that's true.
People.
Naomi, as an actor, you love to be working. What was it like to finally get back on a set after all this time and, get to flex that muscle again?
Yeah, it was great. We all, as Phillip said, we were all, really having experienced these months alone or with your families, but knowing all of the bad things that were going out there in the world and the anxiety that comes with that, the need to connect was really powerful, and connecting with people who share your vision of, in terms of creating, and that is storytelling, which we all love to be a part of. And what better time for storytelling now, having gone through, the isolation that we'd all experienced. So I think there was an incredible amount of joy, particularly in the first days of just being on a set. Like, can you believe it? We're here. And I will say that the film industry knows how to adapt to almost anything. There's no such word as no. We can make it happen, and they have, and continue to do so. But it wasn't without, as Zach and Dylan said, a huge amount of planning and time and money and energy that went into that. I mean, I took my kids and we quarantined together on a beautiful house on the lake for 2 weeks, just because I didn't want to be away from them for too long. It wasn't very much fun for them, but at least we had the lake. Did a bit of fishing and kayaking. And then I said goodbye to them. They went off to school, and I started the shoot. I felt safe because we were shooting outside the whole time. Great protocols were in place. But again, it spoke to Amy's character of that in crisis, completely alone, having to track all of her resources and, on her feet in the quickest way. And I would say it was quite the experience that definitely reflected a lot of what we were going on at that exact time.
I think also, we'd all just spent 6 or 7 months with our families. So when the script came to me just over a year ago, I was really feeling my connection to my 10-year-old and my 13-year-old. And I think we all felt that connection to our loved ones, and that's what fueled the filmmaking. You know, we come out of isolation together. And for filmmakers who are always on the move, you know, as a director, well, you know, sometimes I don't see my kids for months. Well, I just spent the most intense 7 months with them that I've ever spent with my kids. And that, I think, is reflected in the movie that we made.
Mm. We have a question from TIFF audience. It's for Naomi and Christopher. When writing or portraying traumatic events so close to reality, do you find those emotions linger after filming or after writing, in Christopher's case?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big story and one that we can all relate to. Just the news tells us and reminds us every day something awful has happened. But yeah, I have to clock off at the end of the day. I have to stop the mind somehow. And if that means taking a swim in the lake or getting in a hot bath, you know, I have to do that. It's very hard to do, though. It's there in your dreams. It's there in everything you do, which you know that going in, so you prepare yourself for it. But yeah, I try my best to stop at the end of the day so that I can have a clear mind for the next day.
Is that something you've gotten better at over the years? Because you've obviously played so many intense roles. You know, I would think, you know, when you're younger, you might throw yourself all in and not know to step out. But
yeah, no, exactly. But then the kids come and they don't give a shit about what you're doing, and they just want your attention. So yeah, I used to be very. I'd be off in the forest finding bits of bark on the tree and going, what does this represent in my character? You know, like now I'm much more internal, and I write questions to myself before I go to sleep and see if I can unpack the dream the next day. And, you know, I definitely work with symbols and things like that. But I practice helps, and I would just say it's case by case in terms of the prep and how you manage it on the day. Every piece is unique.
Do you mind me asking, you said you work with symbols? Or would you be willing to elaborate on that?
Oh, it's all it sounds bizarre and weird, and unless this is not the right format, I don't think, to discuss it. But yes, sometimes I have a little superstitious thing that becomes a symbol and a thing that gets me through.
That, I mean, whatever you're doing is working. So. Okay. This is such an interesting question, because I never actually thought about it from a writing point of view. Christopher, is it hard for you, you know, creating these characters, living in these situations? Does it end up affecting you?
I mean, this one certainly more. I'm not worried about an asteroid hitting the planet. Say, like, so for the last movie I did, I'm generally worried about that. But this is the sort of thing that, you know, my kids are now at school again. And the weird thing about this movie, quite honestly, if I could just kind of, as an aside, is that this topic was so front and center, you know, unfortunately. And then when the pandemic hit, suddenly it just wasn't an issue anymore. Why? Because kids weren't in school. And you know, unfortunately, now that kids are back in school, now this worry is starting to creep back up again. And it's a uniquely American problem, and it's very, very weird. So yeah, unfortunately, this is one that it does kind of linger because of the topic, you know, not so much about what I wrote, but just, again, it's easier to write a movie about an asteroid hitting the Earth and not have to worry about that in real life. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I do worry about that. So
well, maybe I should.
But I worry about everything. You know, so much of the film takes place with these cell phone conversations. And Phillip, I think you referenced earlier that you had the actors doing it live with Naomi. I just wanted to verify that, because, you know, those are performances, even though we don't see them.
Well, we had a husband and wife team. one of whom does play TJ, the motor mechanic in the film. But a husband and wife team traveled in a car almost immediately in front of Naomi, so they would be in constant contact. And they together played all the parts for her. Then later, other actors came in and revoiced those parts in post-production.
But I will say they were so incredible. You couldn't have done it any other way if we didn't have live voices, because things happened that we weren't accounting for, and it needed to be somebody who was there. You know, if it was pre-recorded, it would have dictated my timing, and yeah, it just would have been a whole different beast. And I for one am incredibly grateful for those two actors. They did an incredible job.
I mean, there's 20 people that she speaks to, so we couldn't obviously import 20 people to set, or we would have broken the protocols of COVID.
Yeah.
So we just had those two playing all the parts for her.
That's amazing. Naomi, we talked about the physical demands of Amy, but I'm curious if there was any, special research you took on for this part, to prepare to play her, because there's so much going on emotionally as well.
Yeah. Well, I, like every parent in this country, read the news and live with dread. And, I've seen my fair share of documentaries, TED Talks, 60 Minutes, from all of these things, from Columbine to Sandy Hook to Parkland. And I went back and reviewed all of those things. Also, the woman's memoir, Sue Claiborne, she gave an interesting talk on the TED Talk. So there was a lot of resources available, unfortunately. I also engaged with a company called Everytown, who are trying to affect gun safety laws and the change of those. So it was, a lot to consume. It was all living there in my imagination, but there is nothing like understanding it on a real level. I mean, the human death toll is just far too great and far too upsetting. And I just wanted to get into that mindset of what it would be like if you were actually one of those people.
I should mention that there is an actor who appears on screen, Colton, I believe it's Gabo, who plays Noah. Naomi, your scenes with him are so wonderful. And I always find it a little strange when you cast people and say, okay, you're a family, and yet you really do feel like mother and son. Can you talk about building that relationship?
Yeah, and it was particularly hard because of COVID. Our time was reduced, and everything was quite different. And, without giving too much away, there's a moment where we're crying and slobbering all over each other, which you have to do as a mother and son. And, I was thinking, oh no, what happened? All of that, but you just have to give yourself to it. And this kid had something raw and extraordinary, and you just never know with a kid what they're going to bring, and it's always a discovery. And he was wonderful. He was right there with me, and I thought he was wonderful in the film too.
Phillip, I'm curious, a lot of this is probably the script itself, but you find such creative ways to keep the tension so high and to keep the momentum going. Were there discussions about that maybe with Christopher, or, were there creative ways that you came up with it in order to just keep everything so tense at all times?
Well, there were lots of conversations with John Brawley, my director of photography, and with my special visual consultant, Warren Thompson, who, with me, shot a lot of those drone shots that are so important in maintaining the tension, because we come away from Naomi's close-ups, and soar above the forest that has trapped her. And a lot of that was shot during pre-production, even before we started shooting. We knew exactly where the scenes were going to take place, but we shot probably the majority of those drone shots before we actually shot the real film.
Wow. Finally, in closing, I would just love to know from each of you what ended up being the biggest challenge in making this film. It could be a logistical, it could be an emotional, something from the emotional standpoint. And let's start with Christopher. Just in the writing, was there a particular scene, I guess without giving too much away, that that you had trouble with?
Yeah, I think that was it. I don't want. It's exactly what you just said. It was not giving too much away. I can't. It's hard now to answer that without now giving stuff away. So, yeah, providing something that created a zigzagging roadmap for the audience. Without purposely misdirecting them at times, but at the same time not sending them too far afield that it was impossible to come back from.
I mean, you did it. I kept thinking I knew where something was going, and kept upending my expectations. So bravo. Dylan, what about for you?
Thank you.
I didn't have many challenges because I wasn't on the set with Phil and Naomi shooting. That seemed like the greatest challenge, getting through these endless, grueling days. Honestly, I didn't think it was a very, I hate to say it, but other than COVID stuff, we had a great script, world-class director, world-class star. We didn't have huge crowd scenes with missile explosions. So, it's a character piece ultimately that's really tense. And so I'm probably the wrong person to ask, but I didn't find it enormously challenging. But
we had to decide to make it. I mean, we had a compelling, as good as you can get in the independent movie business. We get 20 scripts a week. Very rarely do you get one that on the 10th read you still can't put down. You get all the feels. You have Naomi, who's bulletproof and perfect for this, and then we had Phil, and we had to just figure out how to get it done. I mean, we looked all over the world, and we knew we had technically something that could be done in COVID. But we had to figure out how and where, and then we had to, tolerate the risk of doing that. And so once we decided to do it, it became everybody else's burden.
I didn't say it wasn't challenging, but Zach did all of that, not me. So I just said for me it wasn't challenging. For Zach, it was extremely challenging.
Philip, what about for you? What was the biggest challenge in making this film?
I've made a lot of films with a lot of action in them, and but it was the same challenge that you face when you're doing a big action movie, and that is protecting your actor. I was always conscious of how far we were pushing Naomi for the good of her performance, but maybe right to the edge of injuring her. So constantly I was inside her body trying to feel what she was feeling, and I never wanted to push it just too far. I did one day, as I said, when she had real pain, but we got through it. But that was my biggest challenge, not breaking my actress.
Yes, I'll echo that. Definitely my challenge was keeping up with the endurance and wanting to please Philip every time he pushed me, because I'm definitely a competitive person. If somebody sets me a goal, I want to achieve it. And Philip does dance that line of pushing you, but I also knew that he's a softy at heart, despite how strong he was pushing me strongly. But I didn't want to disappoint myself. I wanted to, it all played into the anxiety, the chaos, the crisis of what Amy was going through. And it was survival mode. And the other challenge for me was being away from my kids and fearing if I got myself hurt, if I got sick, if we got stuck, if production had to shut down, all of that. So there was a lot of things swirling around that probably are all right there on the screen as well.
Well, again, it is a fantastic performance. I mean, we're used to fantastic performances for you, but it's really special. I want to thank you all so much for being here, and I want to, of course, thank the TIFF audience for watching at home.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to TIFF for bringing us
Thank you.
to this wonderful festival. It was
Yep.
so good to see the movie with an almost house full of people yesterday. That was an experience.
Wow. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.